So as a bit of context on this meeting, this is one of a series of town hall meetings that were motivated by some work done last spring in a relatively short amount of time from April through the summer, where working groups under the direction of an executive committee, which is under the direction of the provost, was charged with developing possible proposals in generative AI in a variety of areas divided by these working groups, of which this is the teaching and learning working group to improve student outcomes and enhance UW leadership in AI. The context here was primarily in identifying sources of external resources to help pay for things. These ideas were distilled and integrated across the working groups by the executive committee in May and June, and then now in the fall we're having a series of town halls to broaden the discussion and receive thoughts and feedback and other ideas in this space, given the importance of the topic. The task force structure, there's an executive committee that was a resource to the president and the provost. And then the main thing I wanted to convey was that the working groups that were defined, in case you haven't seen this in some of the materials that have come out, were in research, in student services, in teaching and learning, in infrastructure, which is primarily computational infrastructure, and in administration as areas of potential investment for generative AI. And the working group that is providing the context for this discussion was the teaching and learning working group, of which I was a co-chair, and we'll all introduce ourselves in a moment. Okay. The teaching and learning working group had drafted some guiding principles early on, and I won't read all these words, but I wanted to highlight that there was seen to be a UW having a responsibility to lead in this area. You know, it's sort of happening whether we like it or not, and that UW, given its expertise and given our area of influence, really geographically as a tech hub and nationally, and our commitment to higher education and staying at the forefront, it was difficult to argue to how we should wait on this. But also, in addition to sort of pushing things forward, we're also kind of committed to the responsible use of AI, which is a identification of the limiting factors that can cause harms in various ways, and make sure there's equitable access to this. And moreover, that there's a basic understanding of AI that's needed for really all of our students and all our staff and all faculty over time. And the motivation for that is that whether we like it or not, it's here, and there's a future where AI will be an integral part of students' professional and personal lives. And so trying to understand what we can do to support that fact is part of our motivation. There was a broader survey issued to all faculty that collected a lot of interesting information. The only reason I wanted to highlight this one particular question was that the teaching and learning category was second only to administration in identifying areas of potential transformative investment. And the third most popular category was other. So you can see that teaching and learning is on a lot of people's mind and how this is how AI is being used and deployed. I think part of the reason for that being second most popular is that, as we've all probably observed, students are using this already today. And so unlike some of our investments in, say, data science over the past decade or decade and a half, this is really kind of coming bottom up and grassroots, right? So having some understanding of what we want to do strategically at UW is necessary, given that it's happening whether we do anything or not. And this was perhaps captured by this idea that when we ask in what areas of teaching and learning do you see most potential for AI applications, the response was that, well, students are using AI was the most common response. So back to this meeting, this series of town halls provide a forum to share experiences and questions and feedback and requests with the AI task force and with the UW leadership. And in this particular meeting, we are focused on AI education, and that's teaching AI topics, considering all students at UW, and also supporting that AI teaching work. There will be a second AI town hall in the context of the teaching and learning working group that is focused on general pedagogy in the context of AI. So that is not our focus today, but there will be a chance to engage on that topic as well. And the schedule is out there in the materials online as well that we're happy to share with you. The moderators for this meeting are listed here on the slide, and we'll maybe go around and introduce. I'm on the bottom here, but I'll introduce myself first. My name is Bill Howe. I'm an associate professor at the Information School. I was a co-chair for the AI working group on teaching and learning, and I've had a broad interest in both data science and AI education for the last decade or so, and was involved in some of the efforts through the Science Institute, the master's degree in data science and some other efforts. And this has been a prominent area of interest of mine for a while. Magda, do you want to?
Sure. My name is Magda Balazinska. I'm the director of the Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering, and I was also a member of the executive committee for this University of Washington AI task force. I'm also currently a member of the Washington State AI task force. So generally, kind of also, as the director of the Allen School, this is an important topic. There has been just a lot of excitement, and there are a lot of opportunities for the University of Washington and all of us. So I'm excited to be here.
Melanie?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Melanie Walsh, and I'm an assistant professor in the Information School. I'm also adjunct faculty in the English department. My background is originally in English literature. I am a co-PI of a project called AI for Humanists, where we're trying to help humanities scholars understand AI technologies in order to critique them when appropriate and use them in their research when appropriate. And I am broadly invested in humanistic and historical perspectives on AI.
Natasha?
Hi, I'm Natasha. I'm a new assistant professor in the Allen School. My work is focused on, deep learning, reinforcement learning, training language models with reinforcement learning. So some of the reinforcement learning from human feedback techniques that are actually used in systems like ChatGPT. So excited to be here. Thanks.
Ben?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. Ben Marwick is my name. I'm a professor in the Anthropology Department and director of the interdisciplinary undergraduate minor in data science. And I can see many familiar names in the audience who are instructors for classes in our program, which is also where we are starting to see AI come into the curriculum, classes being developed for the minor that have AI sort of as part of their substantial content. So that's me and the data science minor. Thanks.
Not?
Hi, everyone. My name is Anat Caspi. I'm the director of the Tasker Center for Accessible Technology, which is part of the Paul G. Allen School. I'm also adjunct in ECE. I run the UW instance of AI for All, which is a teaching program for underserved high schoolers, teaching them AI. And I also run a program that, to my knowledge, is the largest statewide effort to use AI techniques to collect accessible transportation data in the state of Washington.
And thank you all. So there were a choice of a format for this event, and so we are the request for these wonderful volunteers to join us or in the context of being moderators. But as you can see, there's an enormous amount of expertise and interest in this area. So they'll both be acting as subject matter experts when that's appropriate, but also just here to kind of help kind of capture notes and listen and moderate the discussion as well. So the agenda here in the next few minutes, we'll wrap up this introduction and charge, and then we'll divide into breakouts on topics that I'll show on the next slide. You'll be able to self-select into these breakouts, and if some are less popular than others, that's totally fine. If some get zero attendees, that's fine too. We'll redistribute, and then we'll get back together and report out, led perhaps by the moderators, but everyone will have a chance to weigh in, and we'll try to wrap up in the last 10 minutes here to catch any final words. The mics right now are off only so we can get through this initial part. We'll open them up in a moment before we go to breakouts, and then of course during the report out, we'll also open them up then. There are also notes that we were recording on an online document, and I'll allow the moderator, actually, I'll ask someone who has that link handy to go ahead and share it now. We were debating about whether so many people in the room would be a problem or not, but I think we all decided that it's better to just roll the dice and see what happens. So I'm a big fan of that in general, because I think sometimes people prefer to write some ideas down rather than interrupt the conversation. So I like to be able to capture that information. And maybe I'll share that in a moment too, just so you can see the structure of that document.
I put that notes document in the chat, Bill, just now.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, so if you click that link, you can see the structure. There's some links for each breakout, and we can capture however you want. But just to take a little bit of pressure off the moderators from both moderating and capturing notes, feel free to add your thoughts there as you think them, and we'll try to distill the information in that document into information back to the executive committee, the task force leads, and the provost. So on the actual topics that we considered here, which stemmed from the discussions we had within the teaching and learning working group, are the following. With a short tag, trying to indicate them first, and then a bit of a description. But perhaps most important is breadth. We have a question about AI literacy. What should be taught to everyone? And I think there are understandably different views about this, where it might stop at the level of, we're aware that it exists and we use it for whatever we use it for, and that's it. And then there's another extreme view where perhaps every student that uses these things needs to have some understanding of the technology underneath it in order to understand its limitations and its use. And I think there are reasonable people can disagree about where we try to draw that line. But not only what should be taught, but also how to do so. And that word equitably will show up quite a bit in the discussion, I imagine, because if we're not careful about this, it can easily sort of exacerbate inequality around campus as opposed to help combat it. Around depth, some students across disciplines, not only in STEM, will self-select into choosing to study these topics further. And that again requires some thought about how we actually deliver that. If we have 1 or 2 courses that have 700 people in them, that's probably less ideal than if we have some spread across campus with a bit more domain expertise. And we have some models for doing this that we developed in the context of a data science led in large part by Magda Balazinska, who's here with us today. This idea of micro credentials is a bit more specific. Breadth and depth are kind of self-explanatory, perhaps. Micro credentials are something we spent some time thinking about in the working group, and I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity for folks to weigh in on this. But the thought was that the speed at which some of these topics are emerging is not always conducive to developing sort of core courses with a name in a specific department and attracting people in advertising, developing the curriculum and so on, that we may be kind of always be playing fast follower if we do that. However, what we already see happening is that students are gaining AI experience in the classes they're already taking. They might do a class project that involves critiquing a model or its use. They might do some prompt engineering to try to accomplish something that they otherwise couldn't. They might use it to help them write software to sort of write a larger piece of software than they would normally be able to do in the context of a course. They might train their own model. They might do something to submit a study. And so somehow acknowledging that this work is happening and giving people credit, not just giving people credit so they can feel good about themselves or put a line item on a resume where you have to kind of trust the author of the resume, but actually give UW official credit for this on the transcript so that employers can see, this is somebody that's had an opportunity to fine tune their own model, which differentiates them from students that have not. So we have some ideas on how this might happen, but general feedback about whether this is a good idea or a bad idea, or examples you've seen work or not work elsewhere would be great. On the next one, this AI clinic. The thought was that if people want to do non-trivial work with AI or have some creative idea that they want to apply for their class or in their department, where do they go to get help to try that out, right? If you're browsing around on the web and just trying to use OpenAI's tools for this, you will run into some challenges. And we, again, through the eScience Institute, have some models for how to support this kind of work with intellectual infrastructure, as sometimes we put it. In particular, this topic is near and dear to my heart a little bit, because the other observation that many of us are making is that smaller models that you can deploy locally are not dramatically different in capability than the large private closed for-profit models that you see online, which is a bit of a surprise, but that is the way the wind is blowing here. And so capitalizing on that fact and figuring out how we can specialize these for the needs of our students and our faculty and our goals is something I personally see as a component of UW's leadership in this area, and perhaps delivered through the AI clinic would be one way we can explore that. On related work, this is really just a place where people can share examples or use cases that they've seen around UW or elsewhere, or if you've seen a news article about something going terribly wrong because someone tried to use AI in the classroom, or you'd really like us to emulate what you see at another university your colleagues are exploring. We're hoping to kind of collect those links and collect those stories and collect those anecdotes so that we can kind of show that we've considered what's actually happening out there in the world. And then finally, part of the charge of these working groups were to think pretty big about what might be possible futures where things change significantly, hopefully for the better, but even possibly for the worse. And so we want to make sure we had a bit of a forum for people to kind of separate themselves from maybe the reality of how to get from point A to point B, but just really think big about what might be different or what they might like to see. I'm going to stop sharing there and shut down the slides. I'm going to pull up the document, and then I'll open it up for questions. Let me hit one more share button here. So here is the link that was already shared in chat, and there's links to each section here. And for each breakout, we can go whatever way we want. The moderators and the groups that do it can obviously self-select. We're not trying to put too much of a heavy hand on this, but just to perhaps frame the discussion, there's a bit of text that provides a bit of background for why this breakout was formed, and then there's maybe these two questions about what might you like to see happen in this area. And maybe a request to kind of ignore financial costs, or if not ignore, not center financial costs. And then similarly, what are some things you might definitely not like to see happen, again, aside from concerns about the financial impact of things, since that's a bit of an orthogonal discussion. Maybe with that, I'll open it up to questions or feedback or comments before we divide into breakouts. I see, oh, Magda raised her hand.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Bill, for this great introduction. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I just wanted to add very briefly that I think we're really fortunate to have Provost Tricia Sirio currently kind of leading us in this way. She's working very hard to make sure the University of Washington, all of us have a clear AI strategy, which is to our advantage. If you want to be a leader in this field and do great things in this field, it's really helpful to try to all come together, coordinate our ideas, think big, and move forward. So I'm really grateful for that. And at the same time, she's really trying to do it in a way that allows all our voices to be heard. And this town hall is just one other way that we have to provide ideas, contribute to the overall vision. So I think this is exciting, and I just wanted to emphasize that the provost has her ears open. So I think that it's really worth our time, and I appreciate everyone being here and sharing those ideas. In the context of the work that was done in the spring with the AI task force, kind of in the education working group that Bill was co-chairing, we already had a lot of ideas around education that kind of bubbled up. And some of you may have seen this in the report. So also if people have questions or have any comments, we can also talk about those as well. I think they are nicely reflected in the questions that Bill brought up. So there was a lot of discussion around what do we mean, like in terms of AI literacy, what should our students know and learn? How should we roll that out? How should we teach students who want to learn more in depth at different levels of depth? What should we be doing at the graduate level, undergraduate level? So lots of ideas swirling, and I think the administration at the top, they have their ears open. So it is a good use of our time to be here and participate in this discussion. Thank you.
I saw one question come in the Q&A system. Thanks for using the Q&A system. Is the intent to focus on students or for all UW people? And I answered by typing, but I'll also answer live. So I had a choice there of buttons, and I'm going to do both. But the idea is just certainly all the UW people. Obviously, teaching and learning affects the entire community in various ways. However, I will point out that there is another working group on, say, student services. And so as the conversation kind of drifts into how we sort of support people navigating their course planning or something, there was another working group, and there'll be another town hall that focuses on that. And similarly with perhaps research, which is another way that teaching and learning can easily drift into a conversation about research, but we have a different working group on that. So except for those kind of general scoping, I'd say feel free to talk about the effect on all UW people. But let's charge ahead here a little bit. So do the breakouts want to give a bit of a talk? I end up spending a little bit more time in the smaller breakout, which I feel bad about because it was brilliant people talking about brilliant things, and I wanted to hear what they were saying. But maybe just going down the list, Melanie, do you want to give us a bit of a take on how the conversation on breadth went?
Sure, yeah, I'm furiously trying to record the notes from our conversation. So yeah, I'll try to hit some of the highlights, but I'm going to be missing some things. So anybody from the group, please feel free to share. So some things that we talked about with regard to AI literacy is how are we defining AI? And that being a really important part of, if we're going to have any sort of literacy goals, we want to be clear about what we mean by AI. There were concerns raised about how are we addressing the gaps in AI literacy education from students K through 12 training. Maybe along those lines, there were also concerns raised about if we're developing AI for all initiatives, students are coming from lots of different backgrounds, including different linguistic backgrounds. These tools do not work equitably across languages. and cultures. And so how are we thinking about incorporating that into these efforts? There are concerns about incorporating AI literacy training in training similar to the Title IX trainings that students complete. They already have a bunch of things to complete. This feels like maybe something fundamentally different than that kind of training. However, at the same time, lots of concerns were raised about, or perhaps people were saying it's important to emphasize kind of the legal perspectives around using AI technologies if students are working with, or people at UW are working with, things that are IP issues or privacy issues, and how FERPA plays into all of this. And there were also concerns about trying to standardize literacy across all disciplines and parts of the campus, that there might need to be specialization for depending on where people are coming from. So I think those are some of the main highlights. But again, I would love if anybody else would share, be willing to share things that I did not just address. Maya?
Yeah, hi. I guess I would just share that I felt the tone of our conversation was a bit more skeptical about introducing AI for all than was reflected in your report. I would just add that. And the need, as I would just add something that I said, which is that I realize it wasn't probably the charge of this task force to consider the future of AI at UW in relation to the rest of the university. But that moving forward, that must be central to anything that happens. What does AI for all, something I'm actually not in favor of, mean in terms of our vision for this university? What does it mean in terms of our values for other topics that we are responsible for teaching to our students?
Thank you so much. So seeing no hands, maybe Natasha, do you want to take a whack at our discussion and maybe also differentiating from the breadth, which we spent a little bit of time on, I guess?
Yeah, sure. So I think like distilling, especially some of the stuff we were talking about at the end, I think what we were saying with this is AI research has now become much more accessible broadly, and even CS research, in the sense that LLMs can generate code more easily. So there may be students that are trying to participate in this, and then how do we actually support them in gaining the relevant expertise? And there's, of course, like we highlighted, a big population of students, a lot of applicants who are interested in AI and ML to a bunch of different departments, and maybe the Nobel Prize will even increase this in the life scientists. So how do we support these people with non-traditional, non-CS backgrounds and actually being experts? And we kind of talked about what things that they would need to know at minimum. And we talked about sort of the shortcomings of current AI techniques, like that they're subject to bias, that they hallucinate, although that those basics may be more, and also AI ethics, those basics might be more in the breadth component or in the basic literacy component. So we talked about developing maybe department specialized courses, which talk about the work that is relevant for a particular domain. So for example, in earth sciences, people are using foundation models for modeling the climate. So maybe there could be a focus course on that, and how to incentivize people to create these courses. So something like teaching buyout. Yeah, I think that was most of what we talked about. Did you want to add anything?
I'll maybe mention Miriam's point that there might be a categorization one could do in the space of participating in research to develop new AI methods. That also needs investment and shouldn't be sort of lost in the mix of trying to train users of AI. I don't know if I captured that accurately, Miriam, but I want to make sure you put that point. I thought that was a nice point that I hadn't really thought of.
Thank you. Yeah. So courses that are about developing AI itself for students who are interested in research in advancing AI itself, because the number of such students has grown a lot in multiple departments. So that itself needs attention. And this contrasts with the breadth of AI across disciplines. Thanks.
So we spoke about micro-credentials and ways to sort of recognize students' skill, knowledge development on AI. And we started with the W credit concept, which is, well established, recently reformed credential, and just sort of explored how that could be a good analog for some kind of AI credit or not. And we sort of felt that it had some unique qualities that made it not really ideal as an analog for a kind of AI credit. We talked about credentials outside of the UW transcript. LinkedIn credentials are popular among students, and sort of programs that run on campus but are not actually, degree programs. And we talked about, we heard from, is it Tim at the UW Continuum College, who described their system, which seems to be very mature kind of micro-credentialing platform. They have badges for achievements and for skills, and they have a sort of system of course developers working with learning designers to match learning goals to assessments, and then minimum scores for students to qualify to get a badge, and the badges come with metadata that describe what was behind the earning of the badge, and so that seems like, and it integrates with Canvas, so that seems like a very kind of ready to go micro credential system that's already working in the Continuum College at UW. They work on certificate programs so far, so there'll be a bit of work to adapt this to an undergraduate curriculum, but it seems like the closest fit at the moment that we know of. We talked about things that the challenges with having credentials that are completely at the discernment of a faculty member, and so the W credit has had in the past some issues around that, where it's entirely up to the faculty member about, and there's a little bit of lack of transparency around that. We talked about wanting something that goes through a sort of curriculum vetting process, and something, we also wanted something that had value and had weight, and something that doesn't add additional expense onto the students' course of study. So that's a kind of wrap up of the topics that we covered. And I was very, very happy to have so much expertise on this topic in our group. So thanks very much. And if any of the others want to expand on some of those things, please go ahead.
Does someone want to mention one sentence about the W credit, in case people aren't familiar with it?
Can I invite Anna Preuss to do that? She's an English professor, and so teaches the W credit very, very often. Anna, are you still with us?
Yeah, I am. And I think I think there are probably other folks in here who know more about this than me, but a W credit indicates a writing intensive class. All of the 200 level classes in English automatically come with a W credit. Students have to earn a certain amount of W credits to graduate, but those credits can also be assigned to classes that do not automatically come with a W or writing credit at the discretion of the faculty member.
That's great.
Does that cover it? Okay.
And every student has to do some amount of W credits in order to graduate. Isn't that the case?
Yes, that is the case. I think it's 10 credits. I'm not sure if it has changed, but I think it's 10. And like I said, there are specific requirements for that, like requirements for revision of assignments, not a page count for amount of writing, but specific requirements for what qualifies a writing intensive class that have been developed in English and the program in writing across campus, I believe.
Great, thanks so much.
So if there's other thoughts on that, I'll make a quick observation that I hadn't thought about micro-credentials as a requirement kind of thing, but it kind of engages with the breadth conversation as well. That may or may not be a good idea. I want to, with Maya's point is well taken, that this is not, it's not totally clear that we should be foisting things on people, but that we have a mechanism to do so that kind of crosses departments and crosses things. I didn't quite realize. That's interesting. If I can frame that as a question, has there been thoughts perhaps with respect to writing where I suspect the answer is no, but that you enable you to kind of show off what you have done as opposed to meet this bar that has been set by UW? Because for the AI discussion, we more saw it the other way around. We saw it more as people are kind of earning these skills, earning this experience. How do they kind of demonstrate that to employers and demonstrate it on the record, as opposed to a top-down requirement? Is there a discussion about that with respect to W credits or any other kind of model that anyone's aware of?
Maya Sonnenberg, I'll just jump in because I think Megan Callow has left. And so I'm not speaking for her. All I'm saying is that she is the go-to person for any any questions like that. I know that she, in addition to continuing to work on how W credits are framed at UW, is in the process of several other university-wide writing issues. And so she would really be the person to contact.
And I'm so sorry for this. The last name was, I didn't quite catch the name of the
Megan Callow, Callow.
AOW. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to briefly add, there's I guess the principle of trying to figure out how do we credential folks on the skills that they have rather than try to figure out what this threshold is that folks have to meet. I know at least a term that's related to that I've heard in education a lot is competency-based education. So as folks are exploring the models that work to support that kind of instruction, that's just a search term you may want to explore a little bit, this idea of allowing students to set their own goals for skills or competencies, and then through micro-credentials or other systems to work. So that would be useful.
And I'm sorry, I'm busy typing something. Competency-based credentialing?
Competency-based education is the kind of overarching umbrella for that type of model.
That's great. Thank you so much. All right. If there's no other thoughts about that mechanism, Anat, do you want to say a few words about AI Clinic?
Sure, thank you. So I think there were essentially two lenses in the room regarding these customized small models that can provide competitive capabilities. One was about what are additional capabilities that could enhance our everyday lives, and the other was more around we have not been given equal access to these tools, and so how can we ameliorate the situation there using small customized models. So to all get on the same base level, we kind of tried to align on what are some of the systems that we're actually talking about. So we listed some things there. Some of the things that might be specific to like a small model that is customized would be some guidance to students and staff, etc. But one thing that actually came about was a central guidance within UW to allow people the knowledge of like what's available at the university at the LLM level, who's deploying what systems, what planned deployments are there, and can we collaborate better? And so that would be, it's a little bit self-referential, but the idea is to custom provide these models and enhance overall knowledge across the university. And so if some of these systems are reflective of changing systems, the questions came about like who is pushing the retrain button, what knowledge is being fed, how do we decide on the periodicity of retraining these models, and who gets to vet the veracity and credibility of that information. And so the next sort of part after we aligned was to understand like what we would like to see happen at UW, like specific to people's day-to-day lives, and we listed some things there. But one thing that really stood out was that there are current impedances on AI tool access having to do with lack of processes or the labor to support those deployments within different departments, and so that was something that our conversation focused on. And I'm happy to ask any of the other conversants to contribute here.
Were there these examples are actually really helpful too that I see sort of in the notes there. Are there in the discussion, maybe even just live right now, do people have ideas of things that they've either heard somebody would like to do or they would like to do that they are not quite convinced whether the available tooling that's out there, mostly offered by big tech, can support? So some of these, in a PII situation, for example, that raises some concerns, one way or the other. That's one example. The other is sometimes, another one near and dear to my heart a little bit is that you tend to have to kind of stand on your head to get these things to say anything non-trivial or non-kind of basic or non-very safe when you're ever talking about it, which is not great when you're imagining teaching in a very nuanced context, say about world history or something, right? It's not the best tool right out of the box for that. And so I could imagine kind of a more customized thing that sort of captures the view of the expert faculty we have on campus could be of interest. This may be more me trying to fish for ideas for my own stuff, but any thoughts on that? Are there specialized use cases that people have in mind that they'd like to try to explore? And I'll also comment that the eScience Institute does have some mechanisms to provide this kind of support in various ways. So we wouldn't be starting from scratch, which is one benefit. On to related work, trying to capture some use cases and success stories and other examples of what's going on either here at UW or elsewhere.
Thanks, Bill. I'd love for anybody from the group to jump in with any of the great examples that were shared. I'll just summarize very briefly. We talked about creating learning opportunities that are kind of in-depth and focused for folks, like Hack Weeks or hackathon type events that have been shown to be successful. Several examples of using AI to help people navigate information, where folks have seen examples at other institutions, or just thinking about uses like integrating something into Canvas that would allow people to more easily navigate the content there, helping people explore the curriculum, course descriptions, things like that, helping people explore policy at the UW and understand policy. With that, we heard that there's need for more guidance that for people who are trying to implement things, guidance around security, privacy, what's appropriate, what's not, so that we can explore more of those use cases. And then we had just gotten started touching on things to avoid. Anne-Marie was just starting to introduce an example of tools for students that maybe, if they're poorly thought through, create kind of the wrong incentives in the learning process, and students might kind of circumvent the learning process if things aren't thought through. So it's a very brief summary. Please, anyone jump in with any of the examples. They were great. One of them is in chat as a link, University of Michigan effort on ChatGPT and Canvas. Please take the opportunity to go on the doc and add your own use cases to those notes, and doesn't have to be limited to the group that was in that room.
As we reach the end of the period here, we may be getting people starting to think about their next meeting a little bit. So last but certainly not least, in the big ideas category, Magda, do you want to summarize a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone. We had a great discussion in the big ideas breakout. I think a better name for our breakout, though, would be miscellaneous ideas. I think this is where we shared everything that didn't quite fit in the other categories. So I'll try not quite summarize, but at least briefly highlight some of the topics. They were all like super important. So I'm really glad we had a place to capture them. So first, we talked about how AI tools can help with eliminating kind of the groundwork of teaching around grading, maybe assessing code quality, leaving more space for the human connections and really the advising, supporting the students. So kind of a positive potential for AI. We also talked about intellectual property, the need to make sure at the UW we have clear rules about identifying AI-generated content and human-generated content, and also worrying if we are going to train models specific to the University of Washington on our materials, like our course materials, our content from our libraries. We also have to worry about copyrights and of all of those, and potentially give people the option to opt in or opt out. We also talked about the exciting idea of really allowing students across different units on campus to work together, perhaps develop their own, like digital AI companions or other tools, and really have a way to learn from each other in this peer fashion. So kind of just a bit more so more also ideas, maybe this is kind of back to this bigger ideas, that maybe if each student on the University of Washington campus had the option at the beginning of their career to have this kind of AI companion support them throughout their courses, their educations, well, that can also free up time from the teaching assistants and the faculty to kind of engage in more exciting, more interesting discussions and kind of have the AI help with kind of more the daily regular, tasks. I'm trying to scroll here. Another thing that was also important that was brought up was the need to educate everyone on campus around the risks of the technology and to become critical thinkers. When should AI be applied? When should it not be applied? How should it be applied, etc. So kind of really thinking about all of those aspects as well and making sure this is included in our education. We had a lot of conversations, lots of ideas. We also talked about having best practices and kind of bringing those best practices together in some documents, best practices around using AI, but also about teaching AI. There are examples, for example, of like different kinds of length courses, sometimes offered in partnership with industry. So it would be good to just have these kinds of repositories of ideas. Another idea was that, AI literacy is so important. We should be teaching it the way we teach asbestos training. Actually, I've been here 18 years. I forgot even we give asbestos training to new employees. Apparently we do such a thing. So maybe AI would be kind of similar. And I like the analogy of asbestos. So kind of treat with care as you touch it or don't touch it. And finally, we also talked about the need for training faculty members themselves. So if we are going to all be including some components of AI in courses that maybe are not really purely about AI, but about other topics, but it's just a reasonable, relevant component, then it's important for faculty members to also have this type of support. So that was some of those ideas. If I misrepresented your idea, or if you'd like to add something, I would love for my, colleagues to speak up.
One note, we didn't have time, but I added it to the notes. I think, whether this is with the micro-credential, it is, an AI for all kind of training, whatever that is. I think the question stands is like, what happens after that training, particularly with the changes and the rate of change with technology. How often is that training? Is that an annual training? Is that, just once for students in the quarter that they're entering? And then what opportunities do they have to actually apply knowledge from that training, so that knowledge doesn't atrophy? I also will do a very quick little plug of, if highlighting what something like that could look like. I'm from the Office of Community Standards and Student Conduct, and we're trying to develop an AI like ethics for academic misconduct as one of our sanctions that we're assigning to students. And so if there's interest in kind of further discussing what should that content look like in a brief kind of training, please let me know, because I would love to connect.
That's great. I made a note in the document. One quick observation based on, I love this idea of, we talked a little bit about this, but I hadn't heard the analogy to asbestos is a little bit more pointed than we came up with before. But there's a distinction that I've made in conversations around that kind of idea, to what extent is it required training versus not. And one observation about some of the required trainings is that, the actual knowledge about the topic, for better or for worse, tends to fall a little bit secondary to the ability to assert that everyone has clicked the button and gone through the video and so forth, so that the lawyers are able to say that we've covered everyone. That's a little bit cynical, I know, and I apologize for that. As important as asbestos is, there's a little bit of reality to that. And so this is not to dismiss the idea, though. This is to say that there might be both, right? Where we actually do have fundamental legal requirements emerging, because there are some things happening at the state level and the federal level around, use and misuse, or as Zoe said, there could be some academic conduct norms that we codify and that we need to teach about. But then in addition to that, we also have kind of a, do people really understand what they're talking about, or do they or have they passed the minimum bar? So that sounded a little bit more cynical than I intended for it to do. But I wonder if that distinction, the legal the actual externally defined legal requirement versus the internal, we want everybody to know this, seems like it could be, if anybody had a comment on that, I'd be interested to hear it. Or if Zoe, I don't know if you run into this in your.
Yeah, I'll say, I think my understanding is that I don't work in compliance services necessarily, but my understanding is that most of those that are the annual, or even, at the start of education, start of employment, those are typically related to some law, Title IX, SAM's law for hazing prevention and awareness. The other note that I'll make is whatever that ends up looking like, that compliance piece is really, really difficult. I helped manage the compliance for our hazing prevention intervention training for all faculty, staff, and students. I know our counterparts in Title IX, they have one staff member that her sole responsibility is facilitating that training and ensuring compliance. It is a really big undertaking. And so I think that's another question in terms of resources is if it is going to be mandatory, how are you going to ensure that it's getting done, given that there isn't that same legal component? And also, what does an exemption protocol look like? I think particularly with AI, you could have a number of folks that are uncomfortable engaging with it for any number of reasons, particularly any like personal beliefs. And how do you want to push on that, if at all? What's your compliance protocol? Who's vetting those? Whole big thing. Lots of fun legal questions.
That's great.
So my theory on this is that given that exposure is inevitable, like asbestos on campus, everybody needs to be aware of it, even if they don't want to be exposed to it and don't want to use it. I think the worst thing would be ignorance, right? Would be people not knowing. And given how prevalent it is and will become, and given that there is no way to avoid it increasingly, it seems like basics around privacy, intellectual property, appropriate use, how to opt out, that kind of training doesn't necessarily mean you have to use it, but you should at least be aware of it and be informed. Because right now, everyone's on their own to learn about this stuff, and not everyone is going to make the time to do that. And given the potential risks, I think we have some kind of obligation to make sure everyone at least knows the fundamentals. At least they've got a fighting chance at knowing the good, the bad, and the ugly of it.
Just briefly, to circle back to the conversation from our breakout session, I guess I just want to flag that not everybody was feeling that way, that AI literacy should be required for all, and that maybe it should be an opt-in thing. So just flagging that this is a potential tension among the participants in this group.
Actually, I was going to invite whether Maya, if Miranda or other one wanted to say a little bit more about that, because that certainly is with respect specifically to AI literacy, there's one view, but just in general, there is a notion of refusal here, and how might we explore that path, and not to kind of get sucked into the path of course we're doing this, of course we're investing in this, of course we're doing this. My own view is that we like it or not, we, as was just expressed, there may be a bit of an issue of, if we do nothing, it's worse than if we do something, because we can't stop people from using it. But that's my own personal view. Other discussions around that? Oh, I saw a hand go up before Magda's, but then it disappeared. So I guess Magda, go ahead. Or Carl, or sorry, Carl, was that you?
Yeah, sorry, I think I hit it twice. So I'm coming at this from a totally different angle. I'm a student. Well, I'm a serial entrepreneur, but I'm taking continuing ed. I'm pretty well along with MIT's executive certificate for advanced certificate for executives, I think is what it is. So I look at this a little bit differently as an employer and somebody that's hiring people coming out of UW and not having a level of just some kind of basic acumen, to Jared's point. I think it would be really disappointing. And I think people would be best served if they came out of the institution with a basic understanding of what this is. I think I just can't, from my perspective, I think that would be a huge mistake to not include that as kind of like just some kind of, at least at this point, until AI is potentially absorbed into all kinds of other stuff and maybe goes into some winter or whatever. Again, I think it's important to make that part of the curriculum. That's my vote.
Magda?
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to also build on that. I think that if you look at history, throughout history, whenever there was a major, technological innovation, people who did not embrace it and or did not have access to it were really left behind. Like think about like even from big things like the in the industrialization, or things like automation. More recently, just embracing the internet, being online, doing those things, and now with AI. So I think it's our duty as a university to make sure that our students have access to all of this information, have opportunities to work with it, explore, think about it critically, as some people pointed out. I think it's really, really important. Otherwise, simply the University of Washington, our students, Washington State just will all be left behind. I don't think this is a question of can we engage, can we not engage? It's here. We have to, unless or we will be left behind, and that would be really to the detriment of everyone. From that perspective, do we make classes mandatory? I think it's very difficult. At the university, at the student level, we can make things mandatory because they become just requirements for graduation. More difficult for faculty staff levels, but I think still having those courses saying that they are mandatory, doing our best effort to make sure everyone takes those classes, I think will be to the advantage of our community down the line.
Thanks, Magda. Anna?
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in, especially about the comment that this is, ubiquitous, it's happening, and thus training everyone is better than doing nothing. There are a lot of issues that are ubiquitous and pressing that we don't offer training on. And, I would say, like, we have the internet, right? Are we making people take a literacy class on the internet? Everyone on this campus? Like, there are a lot of these issues, and it's unclear to me why AI would be the thing that needs to be, a campus-wide AI literacy initiative. I use AI in my classes. I do research using AI. I'm not trying to bury my head in the sand. I am supportive of teaching students about these tools, but I just think given the fact that there are many issues that the campus community could use training on that we are not giving training on, I don't buy the argument that because this is happening and it's ubiquitous, everyone has to do the same thing to achieve some sort of AI literacy on this campus. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna. Angie?
Yeah, just following on that, I was the one who brought up the opt-in model in the breath working group, and I was coming from a position of that the right to refuse is a right, and I think that the perspective that tech is inevitable really misses out on that. Really pushes back against the refusal and that right, and also that there's a lot of corporate capture buried into some of these things. And so thinking about not just AI broadly, but that we're giving money to specific companies, and that refusal is part of that decision. And just that I think in general, saying that tech is inevitable really does a lot of support for specific companies rather than sort of the broader goal of informing and critical thinking and understanding how these systems are impacting current society, but really sort of in a limited way that not everyone is using them in society and they're not impacting all societies equitably, and just a lot of those considerations.
Thanks, Angie. I'll take a little bit of abuse of power here. I absolutely agree. I do worry that there's so two comments, I guess. One is the corporate capture issue, I think, is especially important, but as I mentioned earlier, I think there is an alternative path that we need to invest in. I think this idea that because we think this is so important and there is a risk of not training students, that therefore we have to pay OpenAI $1 million a year to have access to everything, I don't think follows. And I think we sometimes are headed down that path, and Michigan went this route, and Arizona went this route, and UW maybe going this route as well. But I think there actually is another path that we can and should follow. But also, I personally kind of believe it is a little bit different than some of the other technology coming back, including things as large and as significant as the internet, which was a little bit more gradual. It's the speed and the sort of undeniable effect on work that's happening here, where people are dropping their HR departments and dropping their software engineering departments and having sort of individual engineers do the work of literally 1,000 engineers before. This is happening right now today, playing out right before our eyes. And so I personally worry a little bit about any kind of a wait and see attitude. But I also can appreciate the idea that flies in the face of refusal, and also maybe sounds a little sensationalized. I don't know. Sorry to editorialize. I shouldn't have done that. That really, I just feel strongly about it. We're at time, I guess. As I walked us out, that was terrible. Any other final comments? So I don't have to be the one who feels guilty about doing that.
Well, let me just add a positive
Okay,
note. I think fundamentally knowledge is power, right? So the more we can educate our students, and I think we're all in agreement that we want to educate our students so that they understand the pros, the cons, some of how those things work, such that they can make their own decisions about where to use AI, when not to use AI. So I think fundamentally, it's just good for our community to be highly informed. And I agree that this does not mean we have to necessarily pay millions of dollars to specific companies. I think there's a lot of other options, including, for example, some of our faculty members are leading this really large-scale effort to build like the Linux equivalent to large language models. It's called Olmo. It's an open source language model, fully open source. So everyone knows the code, how it was trained, the data, everything. And I think some of those are cool ideas of actually doing things, separately from those big tech companies.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I walked us right up to the line here, so I'll let folks escape. Thanks so much. I was just browsing the document. There's actually a lot of material there, so that kind of feels like it kind of came for free. So that was really, really excellent that we were able to do that without having to give me enormous amounts of homework to go draft things. Thanks again. And I think I would say that the channels are open. Certainly mine are, but I think even the folks involved are happy to hear anything anytime from anyone. So please feel free, if you think of something after the fact, to drop in a document or send an email or anything else you can think of to reach out. But the folks are listening. Thank you.